Sewers are there for our health, but what of our brewers? Well, it's long been recognised that beer was safer to drink than water. The Navy took beer on board their ships rather than water. Water went stale and became undrinkable. Beer did not. Also, with so many cesspits being used as toilets in Colchester, there was the ever-present problem of drinking water contamination and the risk of disease. Our opening picture here shows the logo of one of our most recent brewers with the image of the Chapel Viaduct, an indication of where that new brewery is located. Our picture here is entitled The Ale House Door and is by Henry Singleton. Alewives in medieval times were often the principal brewers of ale, a sideline enterprise for them, whilst the men were out in the fields doing proper jobs. Sorry, I don't do PC. The inset picture is a monumental inscription that is in the entranceway of Colchester Castle and reads, "All that pray for Roger Chamberlain and for his wife, God give them all good life." Indeed, this is the only inscription in the castle from such an early period and has been much discoursed about over the years. Research into the borough's records led to a story unfolding of the legal aspects of trading in medieval Colchester, regularly involving Roger Chamberlain's wife Eleanor, a beer seller and brewster. In the year 1340, Roger Chamberlain's wife was taken before the court, accused of selling beer contrary to the assize, viz. a gallon at a penny. Together with 96 other Colchester wives, widows and spinsters. They all lost their case and were fined. In 1351, Roger himself appeared before and was fined by the court for selling wine against the assize. Thereafter, Helena appeared with others at regular intervals over the next 20 or so years. This seemed to be a means by which the court and its clerks could generate income, as they also treated wine sellers, millers and bakers in a like manner. The fines seem to have given a rite of passage to the alewives, which, in the goodness of time, became a licensing system. The relevance of the inscription appears to be that Roger Chamberlain also appeared in the records by the name of Roger Jailer, a reference to his responsibility for the county jail at the castle, and is the earliest inscription record of a seller of beer in the town. This reference is given in isolation for its general interest and to highlight the fact that by the middle of the 14th century, whilst brewing was carried on in towns, alehouses and inns, it remained an important part of women's work. Much general brewing was done by women, known as alewives or brewsters. Hopefully they were buxom, rosy-cheeked, cheerful and happy-go-lucky women, brewing good quality ale, paying the fines that were imposed on them with good grace, whilst providing a good service to their thirsty clients. The truth, as ever, could have been quite different. They could have been right old dragons. As an aside, Colchester has the earliest instance of beer making in the country, or so we claim, as archaeologists discovered in the burnt Boudiccan layer from AD 60, sprouting barley, presumably being got ready for the mash tub. This is an alphabetical list of some of the larger brewers of ale in Colchester over the past couple of centuries. So from the top, the Bawtrys were wealthy farmers, brewers, bankers, justices of the peace and the like. It was John Bawtry that built a brewery at St Botolph's, which was later taken over by Osborne, and of which nothing now exists, all swallowed up by the Southway Works in the 1970s. The brewing business across the country rapidly changed in the 18th century, with brewers who, like the Bawtrys, tended to be wealthy people, seeing the wisdom and profit potential of buying out small brewing concerns and buying up inns and taverns to both control the market in beer and to guarantee an outlet for their beer. Thus, Bawtry owned the Taylor's Arms, the Ship, the Two Sawyers, the Checkers, the Cock, later to become the Joiner's Arms, the Woolpack in Colchester, and others beyond, all now gone except for the Purple Dog, previously the Clarence, previously the Joiner's Arms. Again, the Bawtrys, being well represented on the bench, had little difficulty with licensing matters. Was it ever so? The Botanic Brewery is a bit of a mystery, being located off East Hill in Roman Road, owned by an R. Crook. He seems to have specialised in ginger beer, with many of his pottery bottles having been dug up over the years. Here's one of them. Charrington Nickel and Company, also known as the East Hill Brewery, were the creation of Kimber, Gross and Nickel, whom I'll mention later. A map dated 1848 showed at the bottom of East Hill, on the north side, a porter brewery, which had been founded in 1830. The brewery was rebuilt in 1871. In 1882, the brewery was producing 40,000 barrels of beer per annum. It was enlarged in 1884 to enable it to produce 300 barrels per day. The illustration, dated 1900, shows the layout of the brewery, although all of the buildings at the rear have now disappeared. This earlier drawing shows the brewery looking in southerly direction and probably dates from the 1830s. This illustration, dating from 1913, is one of their advertisements that appeared locally. This illustration, dating from 1885, details the range of drinks that were produced by the company, with beer being sold in 18-gallon kilderkins, 9-gallon firkins, or 4.5-gallon pins. The company benefited from natural spring water that was present at the foot of the hill, as did other brewers similarly situated. Charrington's did a good trade with mineral water too as a result. These buildings on East Hill are all that is left of the original brewery buildings. Nearby rivals, the Colchester Brewing Company, began acquiring stock in the business and had gained a controlling interest by 1920, when malting ceased, and in 1925 the business was wound up and its public houses sold to the Colchester Brewing Company. Eind Coop & Co Limited of Romford took over the brewery in 1925, which was situated behind the present-day Goat and Boot public house. Most of the buildings were demolished in 1971, and now the land is an open space. Some of the houses that Charrington Nickel once owned were the Ale Stores in Shortwire Street, the Angel, Baker's Arms, the Dagmar, the Goat and Boot, the Globe in Military Road, the Greyhound, Horseshoes on Hythe Quay, Leather Bottle, Queen's Hotel, Recreation Hotel, Roman Urn, Royal Oak in Harwich Road, the Sun at Lexton, the Tramway Tavern, the Vine, Welcome Sailor, most of these now consigned to memories. Next we have Cobbold on North Hill. This brewery business started in Colchester through the marriage of Robert Andrews and Anne Cobbold in 1736. Their son Thomas Andrews was a brewer with premises on North Hill, opposite to the Marquis of Granby. There was a family connection with what became the Tully Cobbold brewery business in Ipswich. In 1827, a sale involved this brewery with the well-arranged plant, a family residence with suitable offices, 15 public houses and 2 maltings. This was held at the Three Cups Inn, although it carried on in business until the 1880s. In 1843, John Cobbold and Robert Knipe Cobbold commissioned a local surveyor, W.A. Bowler, to draw plans of the brewery and of all its tied houses, a skillfully and beautifully drawn record which has survived to this day, showing the following houses in Colchester and some 25 others out of the area. We had the Coach and Horses, Castle Globe, Locomotive, Bird in Hand, Sun, Crown and Anchor, Duke of Wellington, White Lion, Mariners, Swan, Mitre, Railway Tavern at Lexton, and the Railway Tavern at Mile End, and the New Inn. They also owned at a later date the Barley Mow, British Grenadier, Horseshoes, Royal Oak in East Stockwell Street, the White Hart in Crouch Street. In 1883, the two brothers sold their Colchester interests to C. Stopes and Son of the Eagle Brewery on East Hill, who no doubt wished to acquire more public houses and at the same time to reducing brewing competition by closing this brewery down. In 1932, the newspapers reported the demolition of Siston Court. All traces of the brewery came to an end. Next, we have the Colchester Brewing Company, who traded from the Eagle Brewery on Hythe Hill. Robert Hernard of Kelvedon, together with his one-time apprentice Christopher Stopes, opened a brewery on East Hill on a humble scale in the late 1820s, where they, and later joined by Robert's son James, strove to brew the best in all the thirsty town of Colchester. On his father's death in 1866, at the age of 91, James sold his interest to Christopher Stopes and retired from business. In 1877, Christopher's son joined him, and later, in 1886, they acquired the Osborne Brewery at St Botolph's, owned by Arthur Thomas Osborne and Arthur Othniel Stopes, with whom there had presumably been a family connection. Christopher Stopes and Son was acquired in 1887 by the Norfolk and Suffolk Brewing Company, a company which had been formed only the previous year as an amalgamation of the various brewing interests of Bridges, Cuthbert and Co. and Harwood and Co. of Ipswich, the Eye Brewery of Eye in Suffolk, the Cross Keys Brewery of Colchester, and the Beccles Brewery of Beccles, Suffolk. In that same year, the company was given the new name of the Colchester Brewing Company Limited. In 1888, the Eagle Brewery, as it was named, was rebuilt with a red sandstone tablet inscribed 12th of May 1888. H. Stopes, architect. The brewery was of 140 quarters capacity and supplied 330 public houses. Mr. Arthur Othniel Stopes was, by then, the managing director. In 1918, Thomas Cudden's Nayland Brewery was acquired, together with 10 public houses. It had also been slowly acquiring stock in its nearby rivals Charrington, Nickel and Company, and by 1920 they had gained a controlling interest. That company and all its public houses being acquired outright in 1925. This is a close-up view of the earlier advertisement picture that I showed. It is an artist's view of the brewery on East Hill around 1920. Many of the buildings here are still standing today, but now of course in alternative use, mainly for housing. Again, this is another section from the same advertisement, an artist's view of the Colchester Brewing Company's maltings at the Hive, which were demolished in the 1960s. Of course, maltings were used to condition the barley to make it ready for the brewing process, and where large floors were needed for the grain to be turned as part of it becoming malted barley. As mentioned elsewhere in this talk, these were just one of many more maltings in the town, all now sadly gone. No need. The upstairs room area of the Goat and Boot pub were allegedly once used as a malting floor, as were probably other upstairs floors of some of our older buildings. This is a section of the 1876 Ordnance Survey map series showing what would have been Stope's Eagle Brewery and the old Whalebone public house that was opposite on East Hill, at the foot of East Hill. We are fortunate indeed to have this collection of old maps, as they show so many of our old buildings, and especially the breweries and the old pubs. This is a list of more than 70 Colchester pubs which were at one time or other owned by the Colchester Brewing Company in Colchester. Too many to name here. That is in addition to the many other pubs that it owned across the region. Around 320 premises at one time. I'm showing you a few pictures of the pubs that are on the list. The Clarence, the Clarendon, Coach and Horses, the Dragoon, the Railway Tavern at North Station, that is, the Rifleman, Ipswich Road, the Seahorse in High Street, the Welcome Sailor, William IV, the Woolpack. It's difficult to give contemporary pictures, as the brewery was taken over by Ein Coop, the Romford Brewers, in the 1920s, and the pubs reverted to a new ownership and signage. Indeed, this company was a giant of its time. The Eagle Brewery building, as pictured here in 2007, has since been converted into offices and residential accommodation. The once golden eagle perched high on the building's facade, having become a rather less impressive black, a lasting testament to the building's former glory. It is inscribed, "Built 1888, Eagle Gate, restored 1988. And the foundation tablet that I mentioned before, shown above, had the name of the Colchester Brewing Company erased during World War II as a precaution against invading Germans knowing which town they were in. One might have hoped that invading Germans would have had a shrewd idea as to where they were before invading us, thereby avoiding the need for Dad's army to deface such an important monument. It looks odd now. The Eagle has the date 1828. As a result of the death of a major shareholder, the Colchester Brewing Company itself was purchased in 1925 by the Ein Coop and Company of Romford. As seems to regularly happen after such a takeover, brewing soon ceased and the premises were used as regional office and depot, distributing beer until 1987. The name, however, lived on as the Colchester Brewing Company Limited of 120 Station Street, Burton-on-Trent, and later became Eindhoven East Anglia Limited around 1962. This brings us to our list of brewers yet again. This time we'll talk about Daniels and Sons Breweries Limited. The Daniel family started brewing at West Burgolt near Colchester in Essex in the late 18th century. Thomas Daniel developed the business at Spreading Oak Farm from the 1820s. Although he was a substantial farmer, in 1848 Daniel was described as a brewer, maltster, brickmaker and coal merchant. One of his sons had joined him in business by 1872, and other sons ran the Castle Brewery in Maidenborough Street in Colchester and the Donnellan Brewery in Rowhedge. In 1877 the three Daniels breweries combined, becoming Daniel and Sons Breweries Limited by 1890. The brewery employed at least 10 brewers and maltsters in 1851, but it expanded in the following decades and production switched entirely to West Burgolt in 1892. The workforce had grown to over 40 by 1900. The company continued in business until 1958, when they sold out to Truman, Hanbury and Buxton Limited of London. Both Colchester and West Burgolt appeared on the labels and other advertising material until its closure, Colchester being the brewing offices and company address, and West Burgolt was the brewery. In 1888, Daniels had 147 public houses and hotels, not all in Colchester of course. By 1958 it owned around 168 pubs in the general area. Much of the Castle Brewery buildings are still intact today, although long since converted for use as private housing and to house the Colchester Museum Resources Department. This is an extract from the good old 1876 Ordnance Survey Maps series showing Daniel's Castle Brewery in Maidenborough Street. Also showing the nearby Swan Inn, the George Hotel and the Sun. Here's another map, this one from 1909, an insurance map. This shows the brewery buildings a few decades later, when it had become an office and distribution depot. These maps were created for insurers to be able to assess the risk of insuring buildings, showing, as they do, the materials of construction. Pubs in Colchester seem to have regularly changed hands, but at various times some of the houses that Daniels owned in the town were the Elmer, Army and Navy, Beer Church Arms, Brewer's Arms, Brewery Tavern, the Bricklayer's Arms, the Bull Hotel, Castle in High Street, the Chaise and Pear, Cherry Tree, Cock and Pie, Colchester Arms in Magdalen Street, the Crown in Lexton Street, the Crown and Sceptre, Dolphin, Drury Hotel, Elephant and Castle, later to become the Headgate Hotel, now the Fox and Fiddler, the Essex Arms, Flying Fox, Fountain, George, Grapes, Grosvenor, Inkerman, Little Crown, Live and Let Live, Lord Raglan, Neptune, Newmarket Tavern, the Norfolk, the Plough, the Prince of Wales, Red Lion Hotel, Rose and Crown in East Street, the Royal Oak, the Salisbury, Sir Colin Campbell, later to become the Gaiety, Smith's Beer House in Parsons Heath, the Stag's Head, later to become the Unicorn in Magdalen Street, the Star at Lexton, Stockwell Arms, the Swan in High Street, the Traveller's Friend, and so on. I'm showing you here some of the pictures as we go along. Pictures that we have, that is. Mr. Peter Wilberforce Daniel died in 1993 at the age of 77. He was the last Daniel link with the company, being its managing director when the company was taken over by Truman's. Here are some of the Daniels adverts dated from 1920 to 1927, and some beer bottle labels from the 1950s. And to finish off, this is the building in West Bergholt in 1992 with its Truman signage. The brewery was later to be sold off during the big purge by Tony Blair's government in the 1980s against brewing monopolies, and it was all closed down and converted into housing units. A sign of the times, the end of an era in Colchester. The last of our old breweries, you could argue, but not the last of beer being brewed in Colchester, of course. But that's another story for another day. Next on our list of Colchester Brewers are Kimber, Gross and Nickel of St Botolph Street. The firm of Kimber, Gross and Nickel was founded in 1830 as a porter brewery and was located behind the Greyhound public house in St Botolph Street. The business later transferred to East Hill when it took the name of Charrington, Nickel and Company. Mr. Kimber was active with purchasing public houses in 1833. On the death of Mr. Hume, he acquired such houses at that time as the Joiner's Arms, the Leather Bottle, the Waterloo. Moving on, I talked about Charrington Nickel earlier on, so finally we have the Osborne Brewery, 1833 to 1886, which was located on the south side of modern-day Osborne Street, a clue to where the name came from, at the foot of St Botolph Street. All traces of it now gone. This map shows its position, along with various other breweries that I've already mentioned, highlighted in red here. A fascinating map in its own right. To quote from an old document, some of the property belonging to Mr. Hume in 1833, including the substantially erected brew house, recently fitted up with a well-arranged and appropriate plant, stores, malt and hop lofts, spirit store, stabling and cooperage, malting, counting house and family residences, and 35 inns and public houses, with the free and public trade being upwards of 4,000 barrels annually. Passed into the hands of John Posford Osborne, who had that same year sold a much smaller brewery to Richard Coleman. In 1839, the brewery was producing beer and vinegar. John Posford Osborne died in 1863 at the age of 70, when his son Arthur Thomas Osborne took a controlling interest. The census of 1871 shows the brewery in the occupation of Arthur J. Osborne, unmarried and aged 41, described as a wine, spirit and beer merchant. The company was listed in 1884 as A&F Osborne and Company, Ale and Porter Merchants of 39 St Botolph Street. Brewing ceased in 1886, with the public houses being acquired by the Colchester Brewing Company. Thomas Osborne retired and a bakery was established at Osborne's Yard, St Botolph's. The brewery stood at the corner of Osborne Street and St Botolph Street, and later still became a boot repair business, It was badly damaged by fire in 1898 and the site was acquired by Hollingtons and converted into a clothing factory. It was partly destroyed by German bombs in February 1944, with no trace of the building standing today. So here are a few pictures of some of the public houses that were owned by Osborne at one time, which numbered the Anchor in Magdalen Street, Bath Hotel, Bell Inn in Priory Street, Buglehorn, Caledonian, Carpenters, Clarence, Colchester Arms, Dolphin, Dragoon, Elephant and Castle, King's Head, Horse and Groom, Lamb in the High Street, Nelson's Head, The Plough, Prince of Wales, Queen's Head, Red Cross, Rising Sun at the Hythe, Rose and Crown, Vineyard Street, Seahorse in High Street, Ship, East Hill, Spread Eagle, Victoria, Wagon and Horses, Waterloo, Whalebone, White Horse, the Woolpack. The upshot of all this was that over the following decades, these acquisitions of brewers and pubs was to get a bigger and bigger affair, resulting in giant property management companies being created, owning tens of thousands of pubs across the country and with brewing of keg beers on a mass scale. The real ale devotees were not happy, and nor were tenants, who were forced to accept high rents and terms and to be told what they can sell. That all came to an end in 1989 with the Beer Orders Act, but that's another story, talked about in another of my lectures. And so we finish our story of Colchester Brewers here, having taken our journey from Boadicea through to more recent times. We have gone from the earliest evidence of brewing through the story of the alewives that did the brewing, leading to the small-time brewing concerns, larger and larger brewers buying up and closing down their smaller rivals, and ending with the destruction of the industry through their sheer greed. But wait! All was not lost. There was a revival, a real ale revival. But again, that is another story to be told another day. I'm sorry, but I could say so much more on this subject, but we need to move on to the last part of this talk.